Elizabeth Scott's Jane Palmer stands as one of Noir's most chilling creations, a woman who views murder as simply another business transaction. In Too Late for Tears, Scott abandons any pretense of sultry charm, delivering instead a performance of calculated ruthlessness that makes other iconic female villains seem almost sympathetic by comparison. When a suitcase full of stolen cash accidentally lands in her lap, Jane doesn't hesitate. She embraces the opportunity with terrifying enthusiasm. The production's restoration in 2014 rescued more than just another lost noir. It revealed a masterpiece that challenges every convention of the genre. Director Byron Haskin crafted a narrative where the traditional moral center simply doesn't exist. Jane's husband desperately wants to return the money, but she's already mentally spending it on fur coats and luxury apartments. Her transformation from suburban housewife to cold-blooded killer happens with such seamless efficiency that it becomes genuinely unsettling. Critic Dave Kerr noted that Scott's Jane Palmer would sell her soul for a fur coat, and she does it with a chilling, ice-cold precision that's unmatched in noir. This assessment captures exactly what makes the production so disturbing: Jane's complete absence of internal conflict. While other noir anti-heroes struggle with guilt or conscience, she operates with the moral flexibility of a seasoned criminal from the opening scene. The restoration process itself reads like a detective story. A 35mm print surfaced in France, mislabeled and forgotten until 2012. UCLA's painstaking work brought the production back from near extinction, making it freely available on the Internet Archive by 2020. Historian Eddie Muller described the suitcase as a Pandora's box, unraveling Jane's facade of middle-class respectability into a vortex of greed and paranoia. A perfect summary of how material desire becomes the story's true antagonist. Edgar G. Ulmer's 6-day shooting schedule for Detour wasn't just a budget constraint. It became the production's defining creative force. Working with a minuscule budget that forced him to reuse sets and rely on natural lighting, Ulmer accidentally discovered a visual language that perfectly matched his story's themes of entrapment and inevitability. The claustrophobic atmosphere that emerged from these limitations mirrors protagonist Al Roberts' increasingly desperate circumstances with unsettling precision. Tom Neal's portrayal of the doomed hitchhiker captures something essential about post-war American disillusionment. His Al Roberts isn't a traditional noir anti-hero seeking redemption. He's a man who accepts his fate with weary resignation, understanding that every choice leads to the same dark destination. Neal's performance strips away any romantic notions about crime or punishment, presenting instead a character who embodies the era's existential exhaustion. Many critics consider Anne Savage's Vera among noir's most venomous creations, a woman whose cruelty seems to spring from pure malice rather than circumstance. Critics argue that her performance transforms what could have been a standard femme fatale into something far more disturbing, a force of nature that destroys everything in her path without apparent motivation. Some critics see Vera as less a character than a manifestation of cosmic indifference, delivered through Savage's casual viciousness. The story's fatalistic worldview shocked audiences expecting traditional moral resolution. Ulmer presents a universe where good intentions guarantee nothing and bad luck follows its own inexorable logic. Many critics describe this philosophical darkness, combined with the raw production values, as creating a work that feels more like a fever dream than conventional entertainment. Now freely available through its public domain status on platforms like Internet Archive and Tubi, Detour has found new audiences who recognize its uncompromising vision. The story's accessibility has cemented its reputation as a masterpiece of resourceful storytelling, proving that creative constraints can produce the most authentic expressions of despair. John Alton's camera work in The Big Combo doesn't just capture shadows, it weaponizes them. The 1955 production showcased the legendary cinematographer at his most inventive, using high-contrast lighting to transform ordinary scenes into psychological battlegrounds. When crime boss Mr. Brown interrogates his victims, Alton's stark illumination isolates faces in pools of light while everything else dissolves into impenetrable darkness, creating a visual language of power and vulnerability. Director Joseph H. Lewis understood that his story of obsession between Police Lieutenant Leonard Diamond and sadistic crime kingpin Brown required more than standard noir aesthetics. The relentless cat-and-mouse game between Cornell Wilde's determined cop and Richard Conte's ruthless gangster becomes a study in masculine fixation, where both men's pursuit of the same woman reveals their fundamental similarities. Lewis crafts each confrontation like a chess match, with Alton's cinematography serving as the board where light and shadow represent territory gained and lost. The production's depiction of violence shocked audiences accustomed to more sanitized crime dramas. Brown's methods of intimidation, particularly a scene involving a hearing aid turned torture device, pushed boundaries that other productions of the era carefully avoided. Critics noted how the story's sexuality simmers beneath every interaction, with Gene Wallace's Susan Lowell caught between two men whose obsession with her becomes increasingly destructive. Alton's technical innovations extend beyond mere atmosphere. His use of deep focus photography allows multiple planes of action to unfold simultaneously, creating compositions where foreground menace and background tension coexist in perfect, unsettling harmony. The famous finale, set in an airplane hangar shrouded in fog, demonstrates how Alton could transform industrial locations into expressionist dreamscapes. Currently available on Pluto TV, The Big Combo stands as perhaps the most visually striking example of how noir cinematography could elevate pulp material into genuine art, with Alton's shadows becoming characters in their own right. Joseph Losey's 1951 thriller The Prowler delivers one of cinema's most unsettling portraits of authority gone rogue. Van Heflin stars as Webb Garwood, a patrol officer whose late-night response to a prowler call becomes the catalyst for a devastating spiral of manipulation and murder. What begins as routine police work transforms into something far more sinister when Garwood becomes obsessed with the lonely housewife who made the call. The film's power lies in its unflinching examination of how easily trust can be weaponized. Garwood doesn't just abuse his badge, he uses it as a key to unlock private lives, exploiting the very vulnerability that citizens expect police to protect. His calculated seduction of Susan Gilvray, played by Evelyn Keyes, reveals a predator who understands that uniform and authority provide perfect camouflage for his true intentions. Losey's direction strips away any romantic veneer from what could have been a conventional love triangle. Instead, the film presents a chilling study of psychological manipulation, where every gesture of protection masks an act of possession. The shadowy cinematography mirrors Garwood's moral darkness, creating a visual language that speaks to the corruption festering beneath suburban respectability. What makes The Prowler particularly remarkable is its prescient critique of post-war American values. Released during an era when faith in institutions ran high, the film dared to suggest that those entrusted with public safety might be the very people citizens should fear most. Losey's own experience with Hollywood's blacklist would soon make this critique deeply personal, as he found himself targeted by the same system he had dared to question. Some critics argue the film's restoration has revealed a masterpiece that was nearly lost to political persecution, proving that some truths are too dangerous to stay buried forever. Paul Henreid's dual performance in The Scar creates a psychological puzzle that goes far beyond typical casting gimmicks. Playing both Johnny Muller, a desperate gambler fleeing his criminal past, and Dr. Bartok, the psychiatrist whose identity he assumes, Henreid transforms what could have been a simple impersonation plot into a haunting meditation on fate and self-destruction. The twist? Muller's attempt to escape his destiny only ensures he meets it more completely. Director Steve Seckley weaponizes mirrors throughout the production, turning every reflective surface into a commentary on fractured identity. These aren't just visual flourishes, they become psychological traps that reveal how Muller's desperate reinvention ultimately leads him deeper into the darkness he's trying to escape. The mirror motifs work overtime, suggesting that running from oneself is not just futile, but actively destructive. What makes Henreid's performance particularly striking is how he differentiates the two characters without relying on obvious physical changes. Muller carries himself with the hunched desperation of a man constantly looking over his shoulder, while Bartok moves with the measured confidence of someone who believes he understands human nature. When Muller assumes Bartok's identity, these physical distinctions blur, creating an unsettling portrait of a man losing himself in his own deception. The production's low budget becomes an asset rather than a limitation. Seckley's stripped-down approach forces viewers to focus on the psychological tension rather than elaborate set pieces. Every scene feels claustrophobic, as if the walls themselves are closing in on Muller's increasingly desperate situation. Streaming availability for The Scar remains inconsistent, though it occasionally surfaces on specialty platforms dedicated to classic cinema. The alternate title, Hollow Triumph, perhaps better captures its central theme, that some victories are indistinguishable from defeats, and some escapes lead directly back to the trap. Boris Ingster's Stranger on the Third Floor emerged from Hollywood's 1940 production lines, carrying the DNA of German expressionism in ways that American cinema had never attempted. The director's background working with European creators translated into a visual vocabulary of distorted perspectives and psychological shadows that would become noir's foundational language. Ingster's low-angle shots and chiaroscuro lighting didn't just create atmosphere, they established a template for depicting urban paranoia that countless works would follow. Peter Lorre's performance as the mysterious drifter transcends typical supporting roles to become something far more unsettling. His character exists in the story's margins, appearing in protagonist Michael Ward's increasingly fragmented reality like a manifestation of guilt and fear. Lorre's ability to project menace through stillness rather than action creates a presence that haunts the narrative long after his limited screen time ends, establishing the noir archetype of the enigmatic outsider whose very existence threatens social order. The story's exploration of wrongful accusation and urban isolation struck audiences as unnervingly contemporary, despite its modest budget and brief production schedule. Ingster crafts a world where circumstantial evidence becomes truth and where the machinery of justice operates with terrifying efficiency against the innocent. This thematic foundation would resonate through decades of noir storytelling, from The Wrong Man to North by Northwest. Ingster's dreamlike sequences blur the boundaries between reality and nightmare in ways that anticipate the psychological complexity of later thrillers. The famous dream sequence, where Ward imagines his own execution, uses surreal imagery and fractured editing to externalize internal terror, a technique that would become central to noir's visual language. Legend suggests that the story's experimental approach initially confused studio executives who expected more conventional crime drama. Now freely accessible through the Internet Archive, Stranger on the Third Floor offers modern audiences the chance to witness noir's birth in real time, complete with all the visual innovations that would define the genre for generations. Ted Tetzlaff's decision to shoot The Window entirely on location in New York's Lower East Side transforms Cornell Woolrich's story into something far more visceral than typical studio productions. The director's background as a cinematographer led him to use actual tenement buildings and fire escapes as more than mere backdrops. They become the physical manifestation of 9-year-old Tommy Woodry's entrapment between disbelieving adults and deadly criminals who know he witnessed their crime. Bobby Driscoll's performance captures the specific terror of childhood powerlessness with remarkable authenticity. His Tommy isn't the precocious movie child of Hollywood convention, but a genuinely frightened boy whose desperate attempts to convince skeptical grown-ups ring with psychological truth. Driscoll navigates the character's escalating panic without falling into theatrical excess, creating a protagonist whose vulnerability drives the narrative tension, rather than simply evoking sympathy. Tetzlaff's use of real urban environments heightens the story's claustrophobic atmosphere in ways that constructed sets never could. The narrow alleyways and cramped apartments become a maze where Tommy's small size works against him. He can hide in spaces adults cannot reach, but he also lacks the physical strength to escape when cornered. This environmental storytelling transforms the cityscape into an active participant in the boy's ordeal. The story's child-centered perspective distinguishes it sharply from other noir entries that had explored urban paranoia through adult eyes. Where previous works presented the city as a place of moral ambiguity and criminal opportunity, The Window reveals it as a landscape of genuine menace viewed from 3 feet off the ground. This shift in viewpoint creates a unique form of suspense that relies on the audience's protective instincts rather than identification with morally compromised protagonists. Currently streaming on the Internet Archive, The Window remains a masterclass in location-based storytelling that proves noir's adaptability to perspectives beyond the traditional criminal underworld. Richard Fleischer's mastery of confined spaces reaches its pinnacle in The Narrow Margin, where the director transforms a moving train into a pressure cooker of escalating tension. Working with a modest budget that forced creative solutions, Fleischer discovered that limitation breeds innovation. The cramped compartments in the narrow corridors become characters themselves, amplifying every gesture and glance between cop Walter Brown and the sharp-tongued mob widow he's escorting to testify. Charles McGraw delivers his most compelling performance as the world-weary detective whose professional duty collides with mounting paranoia. McGraw's Brown operates in a world where every passenger could be an assassin, every stop a potential ambush. The actor's weathered face and clipped delivery create a protagonist who embodies Noir's essential fatalism, a man doing his job despite knowing the odds are stacked against survival. Marie Windsor's portrayal of the witness elevates what could have been a standard damsel in distress role into something far more complex. Her character's razor-sharp dialogue and refusal to play victim transforms the train journey into a battle of wits between two people who need each other but trust no one. Windsor matches McGraw's intensity while maintaining the mysterious edge that keeps both Brown and the audience guessing about her true loyalties. Fleischer's camera work exploits every inch of the train's geography, using long takes and clever angles to maintain visual interest within severely restricted space. Some critics suggest the director's background in animation taught him the value of precise timing, and the narrow margin operates like a perfectly calibrated machine where every scene advances both plot and tension without wasted motion. The story's taut screenplay by Earl Felton packs more genuine surprises into 71 minutes than most features manage in twice the runtime. Now available on physical media with streaming options requiring platform verification, The Narrow Margin stands as proof that Noir's greatest achievements often emerge from the tightest constraints. Alfred Werker's He Walked by Night strips away Noir's typical romantic entanglements and moral ambiguity to focus on something far more chilling, the methodical pursuit of a killer who treats crime like a technical problem to be solved. Richard Basehart's Roy Morgan operates with the cold precision of an engineer, stealing police radios to monitor investigations and modifying weapons with the same detached professionalism others might apply to fixing a car engine. This clinical approach to violence creates a uniquely unsettling antagonist who feels more like a predator studying prey than a traditional criminal driven by passion or greed. The film's documentary-style approach emerged from producer Brian Foy's desire to recreate the procedural realism of actual police work. Real LAPD detectives served as technical advisors, and their influence shows in every methodical step of the investigation, from fingerprint analysis to the systematic canvass of neighborhoods. This attention to authentic police procedure would directly inspire Jack Webb's Dragnet television series, establishing a template for crime drama that prioritized process over personality. Anthony Mann's uncredited directorial contributions become most apparent during the film's climactic chase through Los Angeles' storm drain system. Mann's dynamic camera work transforms the concrete channels into a modernist maze, where shadows and harsh lighting create an almost abstract landscape of pursuit. Many film historians suggest that the sequence's kinetic energy contrasts sharply with the film's otherwise measured pace, indicating Mann's influence on the action sequences, while Werker maintained control over the procedural elements. The film's stark photography captures Los Angeles as a sprawling grid of anonymous streets and institutional buildings, stripping away Hollywood's glamorous facade to reveal the city's industrial skeleton. This unglamorous vision of urban America would become central to Noir's evolving aesthetic. Currently streaming free on YouTube, He Walked by Night remains a fascinating hybrid that bridges the gap between wartime documentaries and the emerging police procedural format that would dominate television for decades. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.